In the name of the Holy One, blessing us, changing us, calling us. Amen. Today is the first Sunday in Advent and the first day of summer. There is no darkness in our southern Advent. We do not need candles to symbolise illumination, though we may still love the way that flickering flames evoke the dance of the unseen spirit among us. However, the tradition of candle lighting may also unnerve us in our city blanketed in ash and dust from the destructive flames of bushfires and the wild, hot winds that fan them. For many, God's presence is not in the flame this Advent, but in the water that douses the fire. God's presence is in the courage of the firefighters. God's presence is in the resilience of compassionate people who come to care for the bodies and spirits of those whose lives have been devastated by fire. Today is the first Sunday in Advent and the first day of summer. The Church has often spoken of the tasks of Advent as preparation and anticipation to prepare for and anticipate both the coming of the Christ child at Christmas, Jesus, the human one in whom we see the face of God, and to prepare for and anticipate the reign of God that Jesus proclaimed and invited us into. Hope for this new way of being remains with us, even when the candle that symbolised it has been extinguished. It is not a hope based in ethereal thoughts and prayers, but in courage. Courage to be, courage to act. There is a risk in naming Advent hope in a liturgy, a risk that it may be disconnected from the things we do and say in our everyday lives. An emphasis on hope in the first Sunday in Advent can easily become a focus for that which is not yet, obscuring the necessary connection between our actions in the present and the coming of that for which we long. And we long for a different future, one that is marked by reconciliation and peace, by justice and joy. Hope is often hard to come by, though, and we are tempted to speak more of dreams and less of our being and our doing. But it is nevertheless vital to name our dreams and God's, as the prophet Isaiah did and the prophet Jesus did before us. Advent is critically concerned with naming and yearning for a future that is different than this present reality, marked as it is by random acts of terror that make even peaceful days seem ominous, and secure places unsafe. marked by the growing anger of the world's dispossessed that threatens to explode, marked by the damage to the earth that we will leave as a tragic legacy to our children and our children's children. Melting glaciers, superstorms, masses of plastic in the ocean, fracking-related earthquakes, relentless drought in Australia and floods in Venice, and the bushfires. Bushfires that in New South Wales have razed more than 1.65 million hectares, an area significantly larger than Sydney and its suburbs. Bushfires that have taken the lives of 6 people, destroyed more than 600 homes of humans, and the habitat of uncountable numbers of non-human creatures that now face functional extinction. And all of this happening before the official start of summer. We have to wonder if nature is at war with us, not that we could blame it if it were. So what does hope mean in the face of this? Where is hope found in the midst of this? Today is the first Sunday of Advent and the first day of summer. Writing about political inertia in the face of the climate emergency, novelist and essayist Richard Flanagan wrote, in a way that was encouraging ordinary people to take action. He said, "We will discover the language of hope in the quality of our courage." We will discover the language of hope in the quality of our courage. Flanagan's revolutionary wisdom, not the rapture-awaiting theology of our Pentecostal Prime Minister, is what we must bring into dialogue with the vision of peace that is found in the prophecy of Isaiah this Advent. We should not come to this text with an unearthed optimism that God will intervene in the turmoil, or worse still, that God will save us and not others because of what we believe about Jesus. We must engage this text as people called to courage, to courageous being and doing, as co-creators with the sacred, bringing this vision to be. The great biblical scholar of the Hebrew Bible, Walter Brueggemann, has compared the prophet Isaiah's beautiful vision of healing and justice and peace to the "I have a dream" speech of Martin Luther King Jr. In the face of the turmoils that I have named, of climate crisis and the eruptions of violence in our time, we can begin to imagine how the people of Israel must have felt over the centuries in the face of threat, destruction, and exile by one empire after another. More than 500 years before Jesus' time, they listened to Isaiah's dream, this vision of God's intentions. And then they looked around them at their once beautiful city, Jerusalem, burned and battered by powers that must have seemed unstoppable. Still, they chose to place their trust in the promises of one more powerful than any destructive force. Here in this vision of Isaiah, the central vision is a great mountain that invites people to a new way of life, a life of peace. The people stream upwards against the flow of rivers, against the forces of gravity, seeking peace where there is no peace. Here on the mountain, the people can learn the ways of Yahweh, who will reconcile the nations. In this expansive vision, which includes the peoples of the world, weapons will be transformed so that instead of fighting one another, all God's children will once again work in the fields, bringing in the bountiful harvest that God has provided for them. This is the dream of peace, the human community in right relation with one another and with the earth. Brueggemann says of Advent, Advent is an abrupt disruption in our ordinary time, an utterly new year, new time, new life. Advent, he says, invites us to awaken from our numbed endurance and our domesticated expectations to consider our life afresh. Advent is a season boldly to lean into God's future, unafraid. It sounds really, really nice, but there is, of course, a catch. Brueggemann says God wills for the world a centre of justice and righteousness that will get our minds off our own petty agendas and our penchant to protect our little investments. He continues, I find that vision, he says, overwhelming and not very welcome, because the things I value most, I am reluctant to lose or risk, or even more reluctant to share. The things of war and division are also things that we struggle with, each one of us individually. This vision demands something of us. It is not just for the politicians and the power brokers. But Isaiah's vision is not just demanding, it's joyful. And that joy must also be part of the journey. This is an active kind of peace, peace in motion, and joy lifts our hearts and moves us, making us feel like singing and dancing and celebrating as we join in enunciating another way of being, even in the midst of turmoil. This is no sit and wait kind of Advent, no sit and wait anticipation, reflecting contemplatively on the beautiful words of the prophets. We are to be a people who act and move and participate, even as we anticipate the promises of God. Yes, we will find the language of hope in the quality of our courage, in the courage to live justly, in the courage to relate peacefully. If Isaiah and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., speaking in contexts of empire and oppression, could dream of peace and lift up that vision for us, we too can dream of peace and rearrange our individual lives and the lives of our communities large and small, to be peacemaking communities of generosity and justice and joy. We can become communities of listening, of self-examination, of acceptance, of change, even if that change is not easy or fast. We can't do this on our own. We need one another. And we need to participate in co-creation with the sacred. For grace enables us to accomplish much more than we can even imagine. The writer of the letter to the Ephesians tells us that this is possible, that God, who by the power at work within us, is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine. God and the power at work within us, individually and in community, is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we could ask or imagine. This is the message, this is the hope that all humanity longs for. It is a deep human need. And every generation needs assurance that the powers of the world, whether the Romans of Jesus' time or the principalities and powers of our own age, do not, will not determine the future. In these coming weeks of Advent, as we hear old stories and sing familiar carols with their lovely messages of serenity, grace, and good wishes, may we hear a call deep in our souls to pursue peace in our lives and in the world around us, not just to talk about it as if it were a sweet, unattainable idea, but to pursue it with our whole being and with the courage that we need. During this season of Advent, for the sake of peace, for the sake of the planet, we each can take real, concrete steps to heal division, alienation, and broken relationship in our family, in our community, and the world. And we can do this if we have courage, beginning with one step, one relationship, perhaps one apology, one offer of peace, one action of solidarity with those who have suffered in the fires, one change in our own lives that will make a difference to the future of planet Earth. In these steps, we live with courage, acknowledging our need to believe that we are part of God's dream. That second candle that we're supposed to light next week, it's the candle of peace, the fire that will go with us. In this community, in the stories of faith, in the water, the wine, and the bread, may we find the courage to be and to do, so that we may indeed live with hope. In us, may that fire burn. Amen.